My name is Maya Walker and I'm 35 years old. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. When I was just 11, my life suddenly took a sharp turn. My parents divorced after endless arguments. I can still recall the sound of doors slamming and the sting of accusations hurled back and forth. My brother, Ethan, only 13 at the time, became my only anchor. On the day the court declared their separation final, my mom quietly packed her things, while my dad moved into a small apartment near downtown. They stopped talking to each other completely, leaving Ethan and me as the unwilling messengers between them. I still remember Mom's weary voice. "Maya, tell your dad the support check hasn't come yet." And Dad's cold tone. "Ethan, tell your mom I'll be picking you kids up an hour earlier this Sunday." Our childhood was steeped in the chill of division. Mom had been a homemaker, never holding steady work. After the divorce, she struggled with outdated skills, while Dad quickly dove into a new relationship with a coworker, neglecting his obligations. I saw Mom cry in the kitchen, staring at a stack of unpaid bills, while Ethan silently squeezed my hand as if to say, "We'll be okay." We learned survival young. At 15, Ethan got a job at the neighborhood grocery store, hauling boxes late into the night. When I turned 13, I washed dishes at a small diner just to add a few extra dollars. We pooled every coin, spreading them across our bedroom floor to decide if we could afford milk, rice, or the electric bill. I'll never forget the time Ethan looked at me and said firmly, "As long as I've got you, I'm not afraid of anything. Whatever happens, I'll always be here for you." That promise burned itself into my heart, keeping me steady when the world felt like it was falling apart. In high school, I was embarrassed wearing secondhand clothes from the thrift store. Kids teased me, but Ethan would step right in front of me saying, "If you mess with my sister, you mess with me." He was lanky and tall, but his fierce stare was enough to make them back down. His protection didn't just shield me from ridicule. It made me believe that even if our parents had turned away, I still had someone who truly loved me. On weekends, when we weren't working, we'd ride our bikes to the park along the Willamette River. We couldn't afford fancy outings, so we shared a ham sandwich, dreaming about the future. Ethan said he wanted to work in construction and become a site supervisor. I dreamed of someday working in a luxury hotel, meeting guests from all over the world. Our dreams were our escape, keeping us from breaking under the weight of reality. I remember one freezing winter night when the heater broke and Mom couldn't afford a repairman. Ethan pulled the blanket around me, taking the cold for himself. Shivering, I asked, "Aren't you freezing?" He just smiled through his frosty breath. "As long as you're warm, I'll be fine." That moment etched itself into my soul, and I silently vowed that one day, I would repay his sacrifices with everything I had. Looking back, I know my childhood was far from normal. But the absence of parental warmth forged something unshakable: the bond between Ethan and me. We didn't have the comfort of a complete family, but we had each other, and that was the only reason we survived those darkest years. I turned 18 with a fierce belief that only education and hard work could break me free from the cycle of poverty. Ethan chose a different path. Instead of college, he went straight to work at a construction company in Portland. I still remember when he handed me his very first paycheck, his voice raspy after long days on site. "Maya, use this to buy your books. You need to study. I'll handle the rest." I felt both touched and guilty, but Ethan refused to take it back. Thanks to his sacrifice, I pursued hotel management at the University of Oregon. At first, I was just a student working night shifts at a small riverside hotel. I cleaned rooms, worked the front desk, sometimes even served tables. Many nights, I was so exhausted I fell asleep over my notes, but I never let myself quit. I kept whispering to myself, "One day Maya Walker will own her own hotel." After graduation, I landed a job at a luxury hotel in Seattle. Within a year, I was promoted to supervisor for my dedication and quick problem solving. I'll never forget one incident when a VIP guest was furious because their room wasn't ready. I immediately apologized, upgraded them to a luxury suite, and arranged a complimentary dinner. From that day, the management saw me differently. I wasn't just an employee, I was someone who could turn crises into opportunities. At 27, I took the biggest risk of my life. I bought an old, rundown hotel on the outskirts of Seattle with nearly $300,000 in bank loans and a small amount of savings. That building had once been the pride of its neighborhood but had long fallen into decay with barely any guests. Many said I was reckless, even my mom sighed. Why not choose a stable job instead of carrying such a huge debt? But Ethan gripped my hand firmly and said, "If anyone can do it, it's you. I'll help." And he did. Ethan used his construction connections to bring in workers at fair rates. He even spent many nights painting walls and repairing doors himself. I still remember one stormy evening when he climbed onto the leaking roof in a raincoat, ignoring my frantic yelling for him to come down. Watching him silhouetted in the rain, I realized this dream wasn't just mine, it was ours. After 2 relentless years, the Aurora Grand reopened. I redesigned the rooms in a modern classic style and launched a restaurant led by a chef from New York. On the day we welcomed our first international guests, I stood at the front desk, my heart pounding. When they praised the service, tears welled in my eyes. I knew I had crossed into a new chapter. By the 3rd year, Aurora Grand was profitable. I reinvested to buy another hotel in San Diego, then expanded into Denver. At 30, I owned 3 hotels and launched Eden Catering, a luxury wedding and event service. My vision was to provide a full experience, elegant spaces paired with exquisite cuisine. Soon, clients began to see the name Maya Walker as a guarantee of excellence. Some celebrity couples even trusted Eden Catering with their big day. When people asked my secret, I would smile and say, 18-hour workdays and never forgetting why I started. Then came my father, the same man who had quietly abandoned us after the divorce. Suddenly, he wanted to show up, inviting me to fancy dinners, introducing me to his friends as if he had a hand in my achievements. I kept quiet, though inside I burned. He had no idea how many nights Ethan and I had counted pennies just to keep the lights on. My mother was no different. She loved boasting, "My daughter runs big hotels now." But she never admitted that our success came from sheer grit, not parental support. Through it all, Ethan remained my partner in everything. By then, he was a construction manager at a major firm, but he never missed a chance to help me expand my hotel chain. I'll never forget what he said as I signed the contract for my 5th property in Dallas. "Maya, you've turned our promise into reality. You didn't just escape the past, you built an empire." And yet, as success grew, I began noticing strange looks from people around me, even from extended family. I saw envy, calculation, and hidden motives in their eyes. Deep down, I had a feeling. Someday, even those closest to me would test my boundaries again. My career entered a steady phase once Aurora Grand and Eden Catering became trusted names across several states. Ethan had also carved out a solid reputation in construction, highly sought after by companies. We kept our Sunday night ritual. Dinner together, talking about work and childhood memories. I believed that nothing could shake our bond as siblings. But then a woman appeared and I began to lose the brother who had once been my whole world. Ethan met Clara Mitchell at a city fundraiser catered by Eden Catering. Clara, 32, was the daughter of a family that owned a chain of car dealerships in the Pacific Northwest. Her mother, Margaret Mitchell, was well known in elite social clubs. I vividly remember the first time I saw Clara. She walked into the hall in a blazing red dress, radiating confidence, her eyes scanning the room as though deciding who was worth her attention. When Ethan introduced us, Clara's smile stopped at polite, then she said something that chilled me. "Oh, this is your sister working in hotels?" Interesting. I've always wondered if standing at the front desk all day is exhausting. I swallowed my irritation and replied with courtesy. Ethan didn't notice the sting in her tone. He just laughed as if Clara had made a harmless joke. After that night, he spent nearly all his time with her, calling me less and less. I told myself he was just in love, which was normal. But soon the changes in him unsettled me. Ethan had always been simple. Worn work boots, his old pickup truck. Yet just a few months into dating Clara, he traded the truck for a shiny SUV on installments, and he began wearing suits even when the occasion didn't call for it. When we rarely met, he tossed around phrases like, "the right circles," or, "our kind of people." My heart ached. This wasn't the brother who once said having just the two of us was enough. One Sunday evening, I set the table for our usual dinner, but Ethan texted last minute. "Sorry, Maya, I'm dining with the Mitchells tonight. They're introducing me to some important friends." I stared at the neatly arranged plates, bitterness rising. Instead of sitting across from me as he had for years, he chose to sit among people who had been strangers only months before. I tried to stay close, but every time I saw Clara, I felt her disdain. At a birthday dinner the Mitchells hosted for Ethan, Margaret sat across from me and asked casually but with a sharp edge. Maya, I hear you own a few hotels. Must be exhausting catering to wealthy clients all the time. I answered shortly, explaining that I managed, not personally served guests. She smirked. Oh, but it's still the service industry, isn't it? Clara nodded in agreement, adding, Mom's right, I could never stand listening to customers complain all day. Ethan just chuckled and said nothing. I stayed silent, but my chest felt heavy. The brother who once shielded me from bullies now sat by while the woman he loved and her mother belittled me. Driving home that night, fear crept in. Ethan was slipping from my world, pulled into a spiral of status that wasn't his. Over time, the signs grew clearer. He stopped mentioning our rough childhood and instead talked about the upscale clubs Clara took him to. The stories of job sites no longer excited him. Instead, he worried about upgrading his image to match high society. Once I gently told him, Ethan, you don't have to change to please anyone. You're already enough. He looked at me briefly, then turned away. Maya, you don't get it. This is my chance to step into another class. You should be happy for me. Those words crushed me. After all our years of struggle, he now saw me as an outsider. I couldn't tell if I was angry or just heartbroken. All I knew was that Clara and her family were slowly reshaping the brother I admired into someone unrecognizable. And deep down, I began to dread the day Ethan would finally choose ambition and love over blood. The news of Ethan proposing to Clara reached me on a windy March afternoon. He called, his voice trembling with excitement. Maya, she said yes. I'm getting married. I sat frozen at my desk, fingers gripping my pen. I had seen the changes in him over the past months, but I never expected things to move so quickly. Ethan told me he had nearly emptied his savings to buy the diamond ring. The proposal took place at the Mitchell's seaside resort, complete with fireworks, wine, and a live orchestra. He described it with enthusiasm while I stayed silent, listening. Inside me, joy was mixed with an uneasy weight I couldn't explain. Just weeks later, Clara and her mother, Margaret, began searching for a wedding venue. They listed luxury hotels in Los Angeles and San Francisco, some costing hundreds of thousands of dollars to rent. Ethan called me in distress. Maya, I can't afford this. What do you think about having it at Aurora Grand? Your place is even more beautiful than the ones they mentioned. He was right. Aurora Grand had been praised in the press, even ranked among the top 10 wedding venues in the country. I saw the pleading look in his eyes, the desperate need to prove himself to Clara's family. Taking a deep breath, I told him, Don't worry. I'll cover the deposit. Consider it my wedding gift to you. He froze. Maya, $65,000 isn't small. Are you sure? I nodded, swallowing a sigh. I'm sure. If it eases your burden, I'll do it. The next day, I signed the contract with Aurora Grand, transferring $65,000 into the events account. It wasn't just a large sum, it equaled nearly an entire quarter's profit. But as I signed my name, I reminded myself, this is for Ethan. He deserves happiness and I can't turn my back. When I handed him a copy of the contract, Ethan hugged me tightly, his voice hoarse. Maya, I owe you too much. I smiled, but deep down a flicker of dread sparked, as though I had just stepped into dangerous territory. Clara couldn't hide her delight when she learned about the payment. During dinner with her family, I overheard her whisper to her mother, At least we don't have to touch our family budget for the deposit. Margaret smiled in approval, then turned to me with a smooth but cutting tone. Maya, you're so generous. Not everyone would hand over that much money without hesitation. I returned her words with a polite smile, but inside, bitterness rose. They clearly saw my contribution as something expected, not a sacrifice. Ethan sat silent, offering no defense. I wanted to believe he was just keeping the peace, but disappointment seeped deep into my heart. From the moment the deposit was paid, Clara and Margaret began sending constant demands. New drapes for the ballroom, imported white roses from Holland, even a temporary fountain in the garden. Whenever I mentioned the rising costs, Clara replied coolly, Your brother will handle it. You've already done your part, haven't you? Though anger bubbled within me, I swallowed it down. I told myself Ethan's happiness mattered most. But as the days passed, I saw his face grow increasingly tense. Beneath the polished suits, he was still my brother, only now suffocated by expectations that weren't his own. One late night, I found Ethan at the hotel bar, drinking whiskey, his eyes weary. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Ethan, are you sure this is what you want? I've already given so much, but I don't want to see you this unhappy." He forced a laugh, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Maya, sometimes climbing to a higher rung means paying the price. Don't worry about me." I didn't reply. I only watched the glass tremble in his hand, the unease inside me growing sharper. By then I knew with chilling clarity that $65,000 wasn't just a gift, it was the fuse to a tragedy waiting to ignite. As the days passed, Ethan and Clara's wedding was prepared in full splendor. Aurora Grand, my hotel, turned into a construction site for decorations. Workers streamed in and out, hanging crystal chandeliers, building an outdoor stage and arranging thousands of imported flowers. I forced myself to remain professional, even as I overheard Clara and her mother's cutting remarks. 3 months before the wedding, I noticed something strange. I hadn't received an invitation. At first, I thought perhaps they assumed I didn't need one, being both the hotel owner and the groom's sister. But then a cousin called me, her voice brimming with excitement. "Maya, did you get Ethan's wedding invite yet?" "Oh my gosh, it's gold embossed with a handwritten note from Clara." I froze. I hadn't received anything. I called Ethan, asking directly, "I haven't seen my invite. Could it have gotten lost?" He was silent for a few seconds, then mumbled, "Clara handled the list. Maybe it was a mistake. I'll check." His awkward tone told me he had no intention of fixing it. I hung up, suspicion burning inside me. A week later, while checking on preparations at Aurora Grand, I saw the seating chart pinned on the planning board. My heart stopped. My name wasn't there. I turned to the event coordinator. "Is this a mistake? I'm the groom's sister." He shifted uncomfortably, murmuring, Clara approved the list herself. She said she wanted to avoid an unfitting atmosphere. I clenched my fists, heat rising in my chest. I had poured in $65,000. I owned the very place hosting the wedding, yet I was being erased like an outsider. The nightmare deepened. On social media, I saw photos from a family shoot with Ethan and Clara, both families gathered in a city garden, everyone smiling brightly. I, Ethan's only sister, hadn't even been invited. My heart cracked open. I called Ethan again, this time with no pretense of calm. "Ethan, what do you have to say to me? Why does everyone have an invitation except me?" On the other end, he was silent for a long time before whispering, "Maya, it's complicated. Clara and her mother, they want everything perfect, no source of conflict." I snapped. "Conflict? Your own sister is a source of conflict? What about my $65,000? He sighed, almost begging, "Please don't make this worse. You know the pressure I'm under. Just this once, Maya. Things will be different later." My hand shook as I set down the phone. Ethan, the same brother who once promised, "As long as I have you, I'm not afraid of anything," was now complicit in erasing me from the most important day of his life. That evening, the final blow came. The wedding planner called in her polished professional tone. "Ms. Walker, I've been instructed by the Mitchell family to inform you that your presence at the ceremony would not be appropriate. However, the deposit of $65,000 will remain applied to the contracted services." I stood frozen in the hotel corridor as if the world had turned its back on me. Collapsing into a chair, my mind raged. Do they think I'll stay silent? That I'll swallow humiliation, lose my money, and forfeit my dignity? Tears streamed down, but then a cold clarity surged through me. If I kept yielding, they would never stop. At that moment, I knew. Maya Walker would no longer be just the dutiful sister, no longer the one bankrolling someone else's dream. I would show them a bitter truth they never saw coming. I sat frozen in my office at Aurora Grand, staring out the glass window at the garden where workers were erecting the floral arch for Ethan and Clara's wedding. Crews rushed to set up sound systems, servers hurried about for the tasting event. All of it funded by the $65,000 I had pulled from my own account. And yet I, his sister, had been cut out as if I were disposable. The moment the wedding planner hung up on me, my blood boiled. Tears no longer came, only a cold, razor-sharp resolve. I pulled out the contract, flipping straight to Clause 14, a detail most clients never bothered to read. Aurora Grand Management reserves the right to cancel any event in cases of fraud, financial abuse, or violation of principles of mutual respect. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. They thought I would stay silent, but the contract itself was my weapon. That very afternoon, I instructed my events manager to call Clara. My voice was calm, but every word cut like steel. Mitchell, relay this to your mother and Ethan. If by 5 o'clock this evening I do not receive a formal apology and a proper invitation to the wedding, the entire contract is void. The ballroom, the garden, the restaurant, even the guest rooms reserved for out-of-towners. Everything will be cancelled. The deposit will be forfeited. The line was silent for a beat before Clara let out a sharp laugh. You're bluffing, Maya. This wedding has been in motion for months. Guests have already booked flights from Europe. You wouldn't dare. I replied evenly, I can. And I will, unless I receive the respect I deserve. The call ended without another word. Within an hour, my phone lit up non-stop. Ethan, Clara, then Margaret, all trying to reach me. I ignored every call. They needed to understand, the power was mine, not theirs. At 4:30, the front desk informed me that the Mitchells and Ethan had arrived, demanding a meeting. I directed them to the grand conference room, where the original contract and all financial documents were already laid out on the table. When I walked in, the air was so heavy it could be sliced. Clara's face was flushed, her eyes brimming. Margaret sat stiff, her lips pressed in a thin, hard line. Ethan's gaze flickered between anger and shame. For the first time, Richard Mitchell, Clara's father, appeared, his expression sour but his voice calculating. Maya, let's resolve this sensibly. This is just a small misunderstanding. No need for ultimatums. I stood tall, my voice measured but sharp. Mr. Mitchell, this isn't a misunderstanding. Your wife and daughter deliberately excluded me, Ethan's sister, from the guest list, while using my money to bankroll the event. That is abuse and a breach of contract. I have full authority to shut this wedding down. Clara burst into tears. We only wanted the day to be perfect without anyone stirring family tensions. I locked eyes with her. Perfection can't be built on humiliation and exploitation. If you truly want to marry Ethan, at least respect his family. Margaret snapped, teeth clenched. This is blackmail, Maya. Ungrateful behavior. Without Clara, your brother wouldn't have even set foot in high society. I let out a cold laugh. Without me, Ethan wouldn't even have this hotel to marry in, or the $65,000 to secure it. Tell me, who's really ungrateful? Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice trembling. Maya, you're going too far. This is my big day. Can't you bend just this once? I turned to him, eyes blazing. I've bent over backwards all this time, Ethan. I gave money, time, endured Clara and her mother's contempt. All for you. And my reward? Being erased from your wedding. The room sank into tense silence. At last, Richard exhaled heavily as though conceding defeat. What do you want, Maya? I answered clearly, each word deliberate. A formal apology. A seat of honor. And acknowledgement that I am family, not some servant in their eyes. Margaret started to protest, but Richard cut her off. Clara, Margaret, enough. Maya's right. Without compromise, we lose everything. Clara's eyes burned red as she choked out. I'm sorry, Maya. It was wrong to let personal feelings dictate my decisions. Margaret's jaw tightened, but she forced the word out. Sorry. Ethan bowed his head, whispering, I'm sorry, Maya. His words came too late, but at least they showed a flicker of the brother I once knew. I gathered the papers, my tone steady. Good. The wedding will go on. But remember this, I am not someone you can erase. I am Maya Walker, and I won't let anyone diminish me again. The silence in the room thickened. No one dared respond. I walked out, feeling lighter, though I knew deep down, the real storm had only just begun. Ethan and Clara's wedding took place on a radiant June morning. Aurora Grand gleamed like a fairy tale castle. Arches draped with pure white flowers, a string quartet playing softly, banquet tables covered in shimmering satin. Guests arrived from everywhere, many of them powerful figures in business and politics. I sat in the front row, wearing a simple but elegant navy dress, my back straight, my gaze calm. I was no longer the erased sister, but the rightful owner of this place. Ethan stood at the floral altar in a finely tailored tuxedo. He looked handsome, but the tension in his eyes betrayed him. As the music swelled, Clara entered, escorted by her father Richard. Her crystal-studded gown dazzled the room, drawing gasps of admiration. She smiled flawlessly, chin high like a queen walking into her coronation. The ceremony began. The minister recited blessings. The hall fell into hushed silence, only the music lingering in the air. I studied every flicker on Ethan's face. He forced a smile, but his eyes kept darting toward me as if searching for anchor. Then came the familiar moment in every wedding, the minister's voice ringing clear. If anyone objects to this union, speak now or remain silent forever. The entire hall held its breath. No one spoke. But just as the minister prepared to continue, Ethan drew a deep breath and declared loudly, "Stop." The music cut abruptly. Guests stirred, whispering in disbelief. Clara snapped her head toward him, her face strained. "Ethan, what are you saying?" He met her gaze, steady. "I can't go through with this ceremony." The hall erupted, murmurs buzzing like a storm. Margaret leapt to her feet, face ashen. "Ethan, have you lost your mind? Guests have flown in from everywhere. Everything is ready and you're ending it at the altar." Clara clutched his hand, voice breaking. "You can't do this. You promised me. I prepared everything for you." Slowly, Ethan pulled his hand free, his eyes wet but resolute. "Clara, you deserve someone who truly loves you, who wants to live in your world without pretending. I'm not that man. I tried to mold myself into someone else, but in doing so, I nearly lost who I was. And I nearly lost the one person who stood by me since childhood." He turned toward me. That look, I recognized it instantly. It was the same gaze from the boy who held my hand trembling at the school gate. The 13-year-old who once swore he'd always protect me. "Maya," his voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I was blind to let others belittle you. I forgot that you are my real family." I clenched my hands, fighting tears. The hall rippled with shock. Some guests rose to their feet, unsure if from outrage or sheer curiosity. Clara screamed, her voice jagged. "You're humiliating me in front of hundreds of people. You'll regret this, Ethan." But Ethan shook his head. He turned to the minister, voice firm. "This ceremony ends here. I cannot say, 'I do' when my heart refuses." Chaos broke loose. Margaret wrapped her arms around Clara, who sobbed uncontrollably, while Richard stood pale with humiliation. A few guests stormed out, others raised their phones to record the scandal. Ethan stepped down and walked straight to me. Under the eyes of hundreds, he grasped my hand, trembling yet determined. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I can't lose my real family. I've made the wrong choices for too long, Maya. From now on, I want to set it right." I couldn't speak. Anger, pain, disappointment, all dissolved in that instant. I didn't know whether to scold him or embrace him, but I knew one thing for certain. The brother I thought I had lost had finally returned. Amid the chaos swirling around us, I whispered, "Ethan, make sure this time you keep your word." He nodded, his eyes steady. And I knew from the moment he dared to cancel this wedding before the entire world, he had truly awakened. The scene after Ethan called off the wedding haunted me for days. The scraping of chairs, the whispers, the probing stares of hundreds of guests echoed in my mind. That day, Aurora Grand wasn't the stage for a perfect wedding but the theater of a relationship collapsing under lies and ambition. Yet in that wreckage I realized something precious. I had regained the brother I thought was lost forever. Ethan left the ceremony in chaos and I walked beside him. We stepped out of the hall, leaving behind Clara's wails and Margaret's furious shouts. In the garden behind the hotel, Ethan suddenly sank onto the steps, burying his face in his hands. I had never seen him so broken. "I ruined everything, Maya," he rasped, breath unsteady. I laid a hand on his shoulder, calm. "You didn't ruin anything. You just saved yourself." He lifted his red eyes. "But everyone will laugh at me. They'll say I'm the man who ran away at the altar, that I'm unworthy. My construction firm could lose contracts, friends might turn their backs." I cut in firmly. "Better that than losing who you are. Better than becoming a puppet for a family that only saw you as a stepping stone." He fell silent, tears soaking his sleeve. In that moment, I knew the walls Clara and her mother had built around him had finally shattered. In the days that followed, local papers and even society magazines swarmed with headlines about the wedding called off mid-ceremony at Aurora Grand. There was mockery but also sympathy. What surprised me most were the letters and emails sent to the hotel, many praising my resolve. Some women entrepreneurs wrote that my story gave them courage to draw boundaries in their own lives. Aurora Grand didn't lose reputation, it flourished. Bookings spiked, with couples saying they wanted to marry at the hotel of the woman who stood up for her worth. As for Ethan, he withdrew quietly from the spotlight, retreating to his small suburban apartment. For a week he called me a few times, his voice heavy. Then one evening he knocked on my door. When I opened it, he stood there holding a box of apple pie, the same kind our mom used to buy for holidays. He gave a sheepish smile. I didn't know how to start, so I brought this. I laughed, pulling him inside. We sat at the kitchen table, sharing pie like children. For the first time in years, I saw the gentleness in his eyes, no longer masked by the false pride Clara had demanded. Slowly he said, I owe you more than I realized. Without you, I would have chained myself to a family that never truly accepted me. I forgot the promise I made when we were kids, that I'd always protect you. Instead, I hurt you the most. I shook my head. What matters is that you saw it and came back. No one's perfect, Ethan. But not everyone has the courage to say no when the world expects them to bow. He squeezed my hand, earnest. You taught me that lesson. And I won't forget it again. Time passed and wounds healed. Ethan returned to his work in construction, this time as himself, not defined by luxury cars or elite banquets. He reconnected with old friends Clara had scorned, and they welcomed him back with warm handshakes. I changed too. I realized success wasn't only about opening more hotels or boosting revenue. It was also about defending myself, setting boundaries, saying enough when others tried to take advantage. I created a small fund, the True Vows Fund, seeded with the very $65,000 I had lost. It helps couples host simple but meaningful weddings, free of ostentation. I wanted to remind people that marriage isn't a social performance. It's a genuine union of two souls. Months later, Clara unexpectedly came to Aurora Grand. She wasn't with her mother, wore no heavy makeup, only a plain outfit. I was wary, but then she whispered, I came to apologize. Her voice trembled, stripped of her old pride. She confessed that after the broken wedding, her mother had tried to push her into new matches with wealthy men, but she finally realized she was nothing more than a prop. Clara had walked away from that mansion and begun therapy. I was wrong to look down on you, she admitted, eyes wet. I treated both you and Ethan horribly. Thank you for freeing him, and for forcing me to face myself. I stayed quiet for a while, then answered, I don't know if I can fully forgive, but I respect your courage to come here. I hope this time you live as yourself, not as your mother's shadow. Clara nodded and left. I knew then, even those who hurt us can change if they dare to face the truth. 1 year after the cancelled wedding, Ethan announced he and his new girlfriend, Hannah, a thoughtful architect, were planning to marry. They chose a small outdoor ceremony in Aurora Grand's back garden, inviting only family and true friends. No gold-dusted champagne, no extravagant orchestra, just flowers, laughter, and sincerity. When Ethan asked me to be his witness of honor, I broke down in tears. This time I wasn't excluded, I was the person he trusted most. As he slipped the ring onto Hannah's finger, his eyes carried no doubt, only certainty. After the ceremony, he embraced me and whispered, I've found my real family. And I'll never lose it again. Maya's story isn't just about a broken wedding, it's a powerful life lesson. Sometimes the people we love most can hurt us the deepest. But by setting boundaries and protecting her own worth, Maya not only preserved her dignity but also brought her brother back to his true family. In today's world, we must remember that money, status, and praise fade quickly. What endures is self-respect and genuine relationships. What do you think about Maya and Ethan's choices in this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories and meaningful lessons about family, love, and life.